In our last episode, we looked at the definitive archaeological evidence. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the ancient Greek translation known as the Septuagint provide concrete physical proof that the Old Testament was locked in ink and perfectly preserved centuries before Jesus was born. This completely destroys the conspiracy theory that later church editors altered the text. But this historical fact sets up an even more explosive reality. It means we possess an unaltered, ancient blueprint of exactly who the Messiah was supposed to be, written 500 to 1,000 years before his birth. Today, we are going to look at that blueprint as one long, cumulative argument. New Age teachers constantly claim that Jesus was just a normal man who traveled to India, achieved a higher vibration, and realized his inner divinity. But when we examine the ancient Hebrew prophets, we discover that the Old Testament explicitly predicted that the Messiah would be Yahweh himself in physical human flesh. Long before the first gospel was written, the identity of Jesus was already decided. Let us begin our journey through the prophetic blueprint in the 8th century BC with the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, we find one of the most famous and explicit declarations of the Messiah's identity in the entire ancient world. The text states, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Pay close attention to the specific Hebrew words used here. The phrase translated as Mighty God is El Gabor. New Age teachers will try to argue that this just means an enlightened hero, a spiritual master, or a mighty man, but we don't have to guess what Isaiah meant. In the very next chapter, Isaiah chapter 10, verse 21, the prophet uses the exact same phrase, El Gabor, to describe Yahweh. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. This is a devastating blow to the New Age narrative. Prophet Isaiah uses the exact same divine title for the child to be born as he does for the sovereign God of Israel. The ancient text does not predict a man who would scale up to become a god. It explicitly predicts a child who is born as the uncreated creator himself. Staying within the book of Isaiah, we look at another foundational piece of the blueprint found in chapter 7, verse 14. The text states, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." The Hebrew name Emmanuel translates literally to "with us is God." A New Age thinker will try to claim that because God is inside all of us, this child simply realized his inner divine spark. But Isaiah is not describing a universal internal vibe or an abstract energy field. He is describing a specific, literal, physical sign, a unique boy born to a virgin who embodies the very presence of Israel's creator among his people. Furthermore, because of the Septuagint, we know that centuries before Jesus was born, Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew word Alma in this verse into the explicit Greek word for virgin, Parthenos. The blueprint was completely public. The Messiah would be a physical child, born by way of a unique miracle, who would be God in human flesh. Moving to the prophet Micah, who also wrote in the 8th century BC, we find a prophecy that names the exact tiny town where the Messiah would be born, while simultaneously laying down an explicit statement about his eternal nature. Micah chapter 5, verse 2 states, "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days." Look closely at that final phrase, "from ancient days." The original Hebrew words are mime olam, which literally translate to "from the days of eternity." This verse completely blocks the New Age idea of reincarnation or Jesus being an old soul who progressed through multiple lifetimes to become an ascended master. The Messiah does not have a starting point. He does not have a past life where he earned his master status. His existence is uncreated, stretching backward into eternity. The prophet states that the ruler born in the physical town of Bethlehem has always existed as God. Our next stop in the cumulative argument brings us to the 5th century BC, to the prophet Zechariah. In Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, we find a prophecy where Yahweh himself, the Lord of hosts, is speaking directly in the first person. The text states, "And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child." Read those words carefully. The speaker is Yahweh, the eternal, invisible, spiritual God of the universe. Yet Yahweh explicitly states, "When they look on me, on whom they have pierced." How can the infinite, non-physical God of the universe be physically pierced? The only possible structural fulfillment of this ancient text is God taking on a real, physical, human body that can be nailed to a cross and pierced with a Roman spear. The Old Testament explicitly sets up a reality where God himself enters history and is physically executed by his creation. Now, let us watch how the historical Jesus used this exact cumulative blueprint to completely trap the religious leaders of his day. In Matthew chapter 22, verses 41 through 46, Jesus is confronting Pharisees. He asks them a simple question: "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" They give the standard human political answer, "The son of David." Jesus immediately springs the trap by quoting Psalm 110, verse 1, which was written by King David. Jesus says, "How is it then that David, in the Spirit, calls him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how is he his son?" To understand the weight of this argument, you have to understand ancient Jewish culture. A father never called his son Lord, because the father always held the higher rank and authority. By showing that King David looked forward in time and called his own descendant "my Lord," Jesus proved that the Messiah was not just a normal human king in David's lineage. The Messiah had to be superior to David, pre-existent, and divine. The text notes that the Pharisees understood exactly what he was doing, and from that day on, no one dared to ask him any more questions. When you stack these pieces together, the argument is unbreakable. The ancient Jewish prophets predicted a Messiah who would be the mighty God, God physically with us, internally eternal, and physically pierced on a cross. The gospel writers did not invent the idea that Jesus was God. They were simply eyewitnesses watching the ancient Old Testament blueprint manifest in real time. If a New Age practitioner claims that the Gospels are invalid or problematic for calling Jesus God, their real issue isn't with Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Their real issue is with Isaiah, Micah, Zechariah, and King David. We have unmasked the historical hoaxes and exposed the textual contradictions. But this leaves us standing at the final, ultimate threshold of our entire investigation. If the New Age movement has completely inverted the identity of Jesus, the definition of love, the nature of sin, and the reality of the physical world, what are the real everyday consequences of following this counterfeit Christ? And what happens when a generation trades a real savior for a cosmic mirror? Find out in our final episode.